Hello, I'm male feminist Anders Blume. Give you a big welcome.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Reflections, and it is a return guest, but not on this channel. That's how old the Reflections I did before with Anders Blume, legendary commentator. I dubbed him the voice of Counter-Strike. You're welcome to that one. Use that one there. That will also be on your tomb, along with in smaller letters, great father, husband, all that stuff, whatever. And then obviously the joke is Semmler's will be nearby, but it's a slightly smaller tombstone. I don't know why I started as a roast. Normally these are really respectful, whatever. But the point I was going to make was, the actual old one we did was when I wasn't even just doing stuff on my own channel. It's actually on what used to be the On Gamers channel in 2014. And as far as I know, I think technically, since it was in May, you would have still been with Nip, but you were doing other events. I think you hadn't maybe even fully branched out. Do you remember roughly what time frame you left Nip?
It sounds about right. It probably would have been around that time, I think. Yeah, you're probably right about that. I probably should have the exact date, but it
sounds like it's about.
It took a while
because I wanted to start there.
It must have been
Obviously, this is Reflections, so let's go back to the initial era. And the obvious question to ask is this, because one thing that does get to me. We'll get to this later in the interview, don't worry. It's obviously easy rage bait for you in this interview, is when everyone just goes, that Anders, I used to like him back in the day, but he's just the same as in 20, which I'll just tell you, pull up a 2013 VOD, we're all dog shit. We're all so amateur and bad. And like half the time, we don't even have the same voices back then, mate. We're all talking different. So one thing I actually want to ask is this. If you just think of the guy who was around for like a year and a half by the time I did that interview, who was that guy? Like, was he an amateur? Did he actually understand he was trying to be the best and he was going to be the best, or he was going to be a big... Who was that guy?
Oh, man. Who was that guy? I think just because from just a personality point of view, I think much more of an introverted person that maybe people recognize. I mean, I think in certain circumstances I can sort of switch out of it, but by my original big fear that I had doing this job was really like, what's going to happen when I go to an event and I'm suddenly, in front of a crowd and all the rest of it. And for like different reasons, I figured out how to do that. But it's not a natural thing for me to be like the sort of outward person in that sense. But once I figured out how to do that, I would say that I had a sort of luxury mindset that I've had to fight for since. But I would say in the first couple of this is going to sound, this is probably not like the best PR for me. But I think I was, in my own brain, I felt completely unbeatable. Like I felt like,
oh wow, even early on.
Yes, like once I figured out like the crowd side of it, I really felt like I have so much control over, like I understand like so much of what's going on in the game. I feel like I'm so much on top of like every single team and everything else. That I love what I do and I'm having so much fun with it. And I think I really had a feeling in the beginning that like I'm going into every tournament. And the thought of like, oh, but what if I screw up and what if I do this? Or what if, I miss like a big play or like that never occurred to me ever. Like in the beginning, I just had this completely, and when I look back on it now, it's so obvious why that's the case. Like it is kind of like a younger person's mentality of like, you've never fallen off the bike yet. So you're like, I just don't care. Like I can do anything. I mean, not that I was super young, but still compared to later. Right. So I would actually say, yes, I think I had like probably like a much more sort of, I don't know if it's arrogant, but sort of bordering in that territory probably a lot more. Yeah, because nothing had really like, I didn't have really gotten any pushback. I think Semmler and I did so much work and like, it's not wrong to say for a good long while, Semmler and I casted every game of Counter-Strike that was played. Like we did all of the European games and then we did all of the NA games. So we stayed up till like 7 a.m. So we just covered the entire spectrum of Counter-Strike. For as long as that was possible at some point, like there were more games that you could cast. But so yeah, I feel like I was on top of the world, basically.
Right. Assuming Liquipedia is up to date. If you saw, I did technically complain in a tweet today where there's an event, for obvious reasons, I know you weren't at Anders, which they list you as being at, because in their brain, Anders was at every major. But anyway, I actually looked it up, and assuming it is true, and your first LAN was DreamHack Summer 2013, believe it or not, Anders, your second LAN, you casted with Thorin. So yes. I know I think you probably told it on stream or some short, but I think it's because you've got a good way of framing it. Tell the story of how the fuck did you, by the way, I'm not even a commentator, how did you come to cast an event with Thorin? And what was you know what I'm talking about, what was the funny story associated with this?
Yeah, this is great. So basically when I started casting, I had, you know, two people that were sort of highlighted to me in the beginning where people said, hey, you've got to just be careful around these guys, basically. And one of them was Lurpus, and the other one was you. And, you know, and obviously the funniest thing is, obviously, if people won't know this, but you had a podcast back then with Khan.
And Lurpus.
Which was a fantastic, and that was obviously a great time. Just you and Lurpus just banging on, wrecking Khan all the time. Yeah. And I can't remember if that podcast or if it was the one with Chanman, but regardless, before this event, so obviously I just get told, hey, you're going to Prague to do this event with, you know, like, you know, Duncan's going to be there. You'll be casting with, he'll be the color commentator. And you and I've never worked, we've never met before.
No, I don't even talk.
Never even talked or anything like that. And I'm watching this podcast. I mean, I'm watching all the Counter-Strike podcasts. I'm watching them religiously. And this is, I think, one day before I go to the airport. And there's, you know, you talk about the fact that you're going to this event and all the rest of it. And you have a little rant before the podcast ends where you basically say, you're sick of all these play-by-play casters, you know, talking out of turn, talking about shit they don't know anything about. And next time that you're next to someone like that, you're just going to wreck them. You're just going to, you know, basically take over and tell them to shut the fuck up or something along those lines. Like, and I just remember sitting there thinking, like, God, like, we're going to the airport. Like, I'm going to be next to this guy. And he already sounds triggered as fuck, basically. No, it was great. And then obviously we get there and you arrive as the last possible person. Like, it's a rehearsal day, it's the first time everybody meets, and everyone in the venue is like, let's order pizza, like, you know, Dunk will get here later. And I'm like, I don't want our first interaction to be one where basically we say, hey, listen, we already ate, like, without you. We just didn't want to wait for you. So I was like, Translator's like, let's not do it, guys. Like, I have a feeling, I can't say for sure, I have a feeling he's going to show up and be a little bit annoyed, you know. So that was our first interaction. I was on edge to begin with. I was like, I want to do everything I can to try to be like, all right, let's not get off to a weird start here. Let's just be cool, you know.
Also, by the way, one thing about that event that is mad surreal is it's actually more relevant now, because if I tell people it was won by a mixed team, what I have to explain to people is the mixed team was, listen, Kenny S. Apex, fucking baller. You had Taz and Neo, fuck yeah. The fifth person was Overdrive. That's not even a joke. That's real. And by the way, they beat like fucking like Navi or something, like with Marklov and shit. Like, that's already really. And also, by the way, as you quickly discovered, Anders, yes, certainly on my travel days I could be a bit crotchety, but actually we already sort of had the fucking banter vibe, didn't we?
No, I mean, this is the irony. Like, it worked out super well. And the same was true when I, you know, the first event I did with Lurpus as well, right? Like, I think that was one of the, if I didn't know already, it was a big reminder for me to know. I try to care less about when people warn me about other people and say, "Oh, do careful." It's like I'm gonna make my own opinion about that. Like, I don't like the trusting whatever other people have synthesized about somebody. So yeah, but it was I still think it was a funny event. I think that was one of those events as well where we probably stayed like 3 or 4 people in the same hotel room, more or less. Like,
oh no, that's the other one. Are you ready? This sounds like a fever dream, Anders. I actually the other day hosted Tweeday's stream and he started telling this story about how mad it was. He said about the time he met us. So here's who was in this one hotel. By the way, this is 2013, guys. This is like no money in esports. Fuck all, like nicer comments. So we go to Prague. I've never even fucking been to Prague before, mate. We're in Prague for like one day or something mental. And in this hotel room, so, you know, 2 beds and then some cots or whatever. Here's who we have rammed in this hotel room. We have me, Anders. The game will restart in 1 second from HLTV. Peter, the guy who did all the HLTV top 20 and stuff. And Tweedy, who at the time was like the NIP video editor or something. And he even says that he just sat there like, holy shit. He was just like listening to the whole conversation, like, what the fuck's going on? But like, that's already mad enough. I know that's out. By the way, one of the things that's funny though is, it does have that weird effect people always say, right? Which is, now that you've been in all the 4 and 5 star hotels and you had the business class flights and you've been there where the TV executives are like, oh yes, esports is really big and we'd like to. So in a weird fucked up way, you start to almost like nostalgically miss how shit it was back then. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's true because I don't know how to make this make sense like in a proper kind of way, but there is a certain sort of, like when you, like you said, when everyone's wearing a suit and tie and everything is like really clean cut and like everything is on the production line, just kind of like we're going, that's a certain kind of feeling. But there's another kind of feeling when you're in a really shit hotel and, you know, you probably, you know, you were at the bar, like the hotel bar, it's like 3 a.m. and you've got like 4 hours of sleep. And obviously those things aren't good, but on some level, there's like this kind of almost like a rock and roll kind of feeling where it's like, well, do whatever the fuck we want. We're in Counter-Strike. Like we'll make it work. We'll do our, we'll give it 200% because everything else is so shit that we just have to try and sort of glue it all together again. Like there definitely is like a certain romanticism about that. I feel that too sometimes.
I looked it up. Apparently it is like the following month after we did that interview that you officially left Nip TV with Semmler and then went and I can't remember if that's when you did the Room on Fire or if that was slightly later branding, but basically that's when you did the pivot. So I'll ask the obvious question.
Yeah.
Again, I'll just leave it open-ended because people might know a lot of people around this era who left an IP eventually were like, is this thing on? Yeah, they all fucking nicked all my money. So everyone knows those stories. We all know them. So
sure, yeah.
When you actually left, did you have any animosity? Did you feel like you were hard done by? What were your thoughts and what do you think now of the NIP era?
I mean, I think it's hard to just, for one, like obviously the whole getting picked up by NIP to begin with and leading that whole project for like NIP TV was like, it's such a big way to be fast tracked forward. It's impossible to say what would have happened otherwise, but I definitely recognize that put me in like the spotlight very, very quickly in that sense. When things went the other way was when this one guy from NIP, Nicholas, he sort of, his life sort of spiraled a bit out of control and he ended up leaving the company, and there's like a big story around that, which is very fun and interesting all on its own. But he was like my contact point for the organization. Right. So when he literally disappeared from one day to the next, like I couldn't even contact him or anything. I was like, oh, I just realized like I don't have a contract. There's nobody else outside of me and Nicholas know what we're doing. And this guy's just gone now. So, and then in the very same time, NIP is purchased by, some other investor people that I've never even heard of or don't know who they are or whatever, like, and they certainly don't know about me either. So the company is getting like a new ownership. My contact is kind of gone. I'm just here with this channel and we have all these, just handshake kind of promises to each other, right? About like, oh, you're going to get a salary for this thing. We'll find a way to get sponsorships and all the rest of it. Like those things were sort of planned out. And now instead, basically, I'm like, oh, I have none of those promises could be fulfilled. There's a whole new management. And also this channel that we've sort of, have been building, like who's actually owning that? Like I just realized if NIP say, well, we own the channel, including all the viewerships and the followers and whatever else, like I could start from scratch tomorrow. Like I could just be a sort of a square one. So I actually went to, to the new management people and I said like, listen, you're going to have to basically like give me the channel and then, I'll rebrand it obviously to something else. Like that was a whole Room on Fire thing. But I really need, like, I can't just be resetting everything. Like that was a really important thing back then. So we had that kind of conversation. And I would say initially that conversation was very hostile. Like they were not happy about the idea that I was going to, try to sort of walk over. Because back then, obviously, I just felt incredibly like, it's like, oh, they're so greedy or whatever. Now I think from like a company point of view, I kind of understand where they're coming from. But at the end of the day, they did say like, okay, listen, fine. We recognize that you pretty much built this and, we've never paid you any money or anything else like that. So whatever, like take it and go away. And then that's it. So I wouldn't say it was animosity, but there was a moment there where there was like real stress in my life over, just like the situation of having one guy, no contract, he leaves, and then you're just, potentially reset.
One thing that might shock people in the modern day, because you are the voice of Counter-Strike, and in their brain, they think you did every one of the early events. In fact, I just jokingly alluded to it there. Everyone thinks you just did every major. But actually, I want to use the majors to highlight something about how the industry works, which is when you first came along was before there was majors, and people might not know, but CSGO was actually smaller even than 1.6 at that time. It didn't have these big stage events. In fact, famously, I always say this, it wasn't called even ESL One, it was called EMS, because ESL had sort of relegated us to the second tier. Meanwhile, the top tier was, StarCraft and Quake and fucking League of Legends, for fuck's sake, which back then we were all like, what the fuck, that's some noob shit, Warcraft. Like, so at the time, people viewed CS as it's going to die or it's going to be this like smaller esport. And what I notice is this, even though to me, I remember you doing like 1 million online copies, it felt like you did every game for the first year. But when the major first came, DreamHack Winter 2013, you and Semmler were there, but then I noticed, wait a minute, that they're like sort of prioritizing like Tosspot here though, because he's a legendary caster, even though, he just does like the ESL events, for example. He just rocks up for that. And then if people don't know, I think he worked for ESL at the time, he does other events and other fucking games. And then I noticed the next year, hence why my joke earlier, the reason I know you didn't work Katowice is because when you didn't do it, I got hired by Red Eye. Now, I didn't say I did the event, Anders. I got hired by Red Eye and I was fired by Red Eye. So that just to keep it 100. Yeah. So you weren't hired for that event because basically at the time, as far as I know, they were sort of trying to, maybe push back and keep you at a certain rate and do. There was, if people don't know, there was also a fucking Succession, Game of Thrones, mind games going on in esports. And then I noticed if you keep even going on beyond that, then there would be like you got into the ESL majors, etc. But even then, you weren't necessarily getting the final, or if you were, it was either you or Semmler. They'd break you up and they'd make some weird casting again with maybe like Tosspot or Pansy or a fucking player. And this whole weird thing was going on. So even though this really was the main duo was Anders and Semmler, and both of you want to work the events, it seemed like early on, essentially, the dreaded, dare I say it, old boys club. Certain people maybe didn't like the idea Anders was just coming and taking over CS. Do you think so?
I mean, 100%. And it's probably way more obvious to me now than it was then. And I actually think Semmler was so much smarter on this point than I was. Like, I think Semmler knew much more about the esports industry in general, right? Because he'd already been, in other games. Like, he had more of a place in esports than I did when we started casting, because he was living with Too Good and all the rest of it, and had done like StarCraft and other games, Bloodline Champions, I think. But so I think Semmler even then was like aware that this whole thing of splitting up Anders and Semmler in a casting, there was like a way to try to basically promote other people, sort of in the eyes of the community. The thing is, even if I could recognize that, there's a part of me that didn't mind it so much, which I think now, don't know I think now I would say that's probably a really naive way to view things, but I like the idea of saying, well, if we're going to get somebody like, let's say, Pansy, who's also been around in esports a lot longer than I had at that point in time, but like, I think Lauren is really good at her job, and if I can help, sort of, be next to her in a Counter-Strike, commentary position, and that makes her look better, and then everyone's happy. It's like I don't really mind that. Like, I just thought that was sick. Like, okay, let's go. But I recognize in retrospect, what it also does is you end up creating your own competition a lot more. And the chances that anyone will ever turn around and say, hey, thanks for that, it just like that's not happening, basically. Yes. So I would say now I'm probably a bit more cynical on that front, which I partly hate to be, but definitely there was a lot of that stuff going around. And like before the first DreamHack in 2013, I remember like there was so much noise being made in the community. People were saying like, well, we're probably going to get people wanted Toby 1 from Dota to come and cast Counter-Strike. Like, that was a big thing. Yeah. And I just remember thinking like, we're never going to be like, this guy is like a giant compared to, like, we're just small Counter-Strike people over here. We don't know anything. Like, we can't compete with it, basically. So there was a lot of that stuff happening, that was probably like most, if I had any stress at that point in time, it was about this. It was about the idea that what do we do if the real big esports people show up and take everything away from us, and we can't fight them, which I think in retrospect was a bit like, I don't think that can happen. I think you can only do that if you are like as dedicated as we were to the game, basically. So.
No, by the way, I also remember the Toby 1 thing, because maybe you'll remember this. At the time, and this might shock people, I was just a little journalist guy, mate, who did the odd event, Like, my Twitter probably had, like, I don't know, 3,000 followers. It was nothing back then. But famously, I think I did a tweet where I just said something like, it was like, the article was like, Toby 1 coming to CS. And I just, because it felt like what you're saying, like, someone else looking over, like, oh, is the game getting big? I'll have some of that. Yeah. I did a tweet that was like, fuck off, back to Dota or something. And I just remember it being like the headline, like, frag fighting, like, Swedish or whatever, Sick. And then even Toby won't get like offended, like, what the fuck, what have I done to you or whatever. So actually that does remind me of that. But anyway, along those lines, a pivot question is, this is going to be a theme of the interview. Not a massive one, but it'll be one of the undercurrents and through lines, is what you're talking about here is something that people don't understand. They just see the end product on the camera, or they see, oh, you're good, so people hire you. But they don't know, how do you get hired? What are the relationships like? What is networking like in the industry? And one thing you're describing here, Anders, is, on the one hand, yes, I'm sure one of the reasons why actually a lot of industry people like you is that you were someone who was very open, and you didn't seem like you were someone who was scheming or you had an agenda. And actually, if you were on top, as you said, debatable whether this is the right tactic or not. You were the sort of person like, hey, share the wealth. Everyone can eat at the table. But I would say this, Anders. This is reflections. We're now 11 years later. What you maybe had to learn the hard way was that when you are the strong one and you have the leverage, you can choose to be merciful. You can choose to be. You can even tell people, you know what? Even though actually I have the power, and sort of, if we all were being honest, you know I do. I'll pretend I don't. I'll pretend we're all just here. We'll just do it. But the difference is when someone else has the fucking power, they have the fucking gauntlet, as it were. Not everyone does share, and not everyone is nice. And in fact, some people use that leverage to fuck you, right?
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I find that just as a person, that's like that's a different kind of like test of your personality. Because you're right, it is actually, in a way, it is a bit cheap to be the guy who's like, oh, we should all be friends and like we can always all get along. It's going to be great. Like when you are getting invited to, like at that point in time, like, you know, we're getting invited to everything, right? So if you're one of the people who's not getting invited to everything, that probably feels a bit annoying. You're like, oh, thanks guys that we're getting to eat at this table too. And I would say like the real test for me personally, like later in my career, has been to try and sort of like say, well, now that I'm no longer just de facto the guy who's getting every grand final, or whatever, like what was definitely the case at one point in time, like how do you mentally sort of deal with that and not become bitter about it? And that's been, I would say that's been a real struggle in some sense. And so Semmler and I had some conversations early on about like how do we sort of want to do things now that we are sort of on top of the world in the Counter-Strike casting space. And one of the example cases that we had was the way that, at least, I don't know how much of this is actually true, but the perception was that that over in the StarCraft space, we had Artosis and Tasteless, who were sort of, it felt like we're running things with sort of more of an iron fist kind of approach. That if you wanted to work in StarCraft, you basically had to work under Tasteless and Artosis. And there were a lot of, I remember there were a lot of industry stories where people would tell us like, oh, you know, they basically own the space and there could be no other good casters really coming up. I don't know if it's true or not. I'm just saying that was
sure. Kind of that's what people said. Certainly. Yeah.
Yeah. That was the atmosphere at the time. And there was a part of me that thought, even though I can understand the strategic benefit of doing that, what I really want is like a Counter-Strike space that is essentially bigger than any one person can own it. Because there was like a phrase that sort of echoed in my mind a lot, which was something like, if Semmler and I can be sort of the kings of Counter-Strike forever, then it must mean that Counter-Strike just never got that big, basically. That like if two people can sort of just stay on top forever, then that is, I think more than anything, it's a sign that the game is kind of like stalled out, and that's a bit of an issue. So some part of me always wanted to say, if we get outcompeted by people who are better than us, then that sucks for us, but it's good for the game long term. Like it has to be a space where people can show up and basically win by just being better and not get artificially just stopped because some people got there first. So that was like, again, I recognize like the error in that tactic in some sense if you're just thinking about it from a business point of view. But there is a part of me that's thinking, that was even now, and I mean, and certainly back then, was much more thinking about it from like a Counter-Strike point of view, even though it seems like a weird alliance to keep with a game that, especially with a company like Valve that probably don't care so much. But that's kind of how I felt.
Since you were working with Nip TV, and initially you were Nip TV -Anders, that was actually the name, in fact. And if people are watching CS now, they're going, his mouse never going to beat Vitality. They just lose all the time to them. Anders was there when Nip didn't. People forget this. They always tell the stories, right? Nip was 87-0 and never lost. Yeah, true, but there's a secondary detail you need to mention there. There was a team called VeryGames that was really good too, but they used to just lose them every single time as well. It was like it's reminded me. It's given me flashbacks of that. You were there at the time. What was this rivalry like?
I mean, it was so exciting for a long time, but obviously the longer it stretched out, the more the excitement kind of became like, okay, come on, like this is just like, I actually almost thought at one point this is going to be like a threat to the game because we're just doing tournaments where we know what the winner is from the start. Like how boring is that? I guess the upside is that VeryGames, whenever they would lose to NIP, it was like a ridiculous amount of times, like 16-14.
Oh, sure,
like it was so close. So that did make it interesting, but there was a real fear, I think, at one point that the outcome was too obvious. I think I can't remember when the streak was broken, or if it was just like the LAN part of it. But the first time I ever met the NIP guys in a studio in Stockholm, casting like online Counter-Strike for some like SLTV qualifier or something like that. Was when I think it was when Astana Dragons, or maybe it was like one of the VP line. I don't know. Like there's some CIS lineup had just been put together, and they finally lost to this lineup. And I was like in the studio with all the NIP people, like Forrest. I'd only just met them. You got to remember, for me, Forrest and Get Right and Exist are like, I didn't watch so much Source, so I didn't know Freiburg and 59 that well. But the other three guys are like sort of childhood legends for me. Like that's how I think of them. And I just met them in a studio. Like they traveled to a studio just to basically promote NIP TV with me sort of at the head of it. So they're like super awesome people who just wanted to help out, and they went and did this. And then I'm casting the game where they finally lose, and they're like 5 meters away from me, and I'm shouting like, yes, NIP's been taken down. This is exciting. Like finally something's changed, And I just remember it was such an awkward kind of moment. But I would say that the NIP VeryGames rivalry was just incredibly epic. It's just that it went on for so long that I think even the part of that feeling kind of went away, and it was like, they're never going to lose. And then obviously they lost the major, so that was funny.
Right, an obvious question for me, but it'll be an old school, like you have to be there to know what I'm talking about, is because you were Nip Anders and NIP never fucking lost and won all the tournaments. Back then, an obvious complaint would be like, he's just biased to Nip. Look, he just wants Nip to...
Sure.
I'm sure that's something you had to overcome.
Yeah, that was a really big criticism, right? People were like, "Oh, this is boring. He's just cheering on NIP all the time." And then, but what was really bizarre? So I made a really big deal. I knew that was going to be a problem. So I would say I almost tried as much as I could to be critical of like anything that was going on. And the result was that the NIP fans were angry with me. Like, so I had sort of both sides basically yelling at me for a lot of this time. Where like the NIP fans were like, "You're so critical. Like, why don't you give them any props?" And I'm like, they're beating teams that are like way worse than them. I'm not going to give them a lot of props for that. And, they're making some mistakes. But also, you got to remember as well, so many of those games were, NIP could get into a bad position, but then Forrest or Get Right would show up and win like a 1 versus 3 or 4. That just happened all the time, which in modern day Counter-Strike is almost impossible, right? But that was just the norm. It was like whenever there was a 1v3 with Get Right alive, we'd be like, well, he's probably going to win it. He's pretty good. Like, check this out. And then he would. But it's hard to pray. Like, it's obviously it's enjoyable to watch Get Right clutch something, but at the same time, it's not the best Counter-Strike from either side in some sense. And so I remember like that was definitely an interesting thing to try to balance. But I really felt like I wasn't biased, so in some sense I just felt like I can't put too much weight into that criticism, but I was getting yelled at a lot from all sides is what the feeling was, so.
Right, one thing I will say, look, I'm biased. I my mates, and then also some of these people go fuck themselves. I don't care. But when you were coming up in the casting scene in this era, when maybe people did think, oh, you have to pay your dues. If you don't know, by the way, esports is still like that, guys. They get like spoiler. Look at people like Harry and Hugo, and look at Launders and Scrawny. It doesn't matter. I always tell them it's not about being the best now, mate. It takes a couple of years before everyone like acknowledges that. It's like that thing of first day fight you and mark you. That fucking Gandhi quote or whatever. So anyway, when you were on the way up, one thing I will say that I think in hindsight plays so strongly to your position is, remember, Tosspot himself has one of the most iconic calls of all time, the NIP volley 1v5 against Pentagram and Neo and Taz. This is sensational. Everyone remembers it, even though people forget they actually lost that game and got shit on, right? But that call is so iconic. But here's the funny thing, Anders. Most casters have one or two of those moments. But even in this era, when you were doing most of the normal events, and then you were sort of maybe sidelined for some of the majors, or you would work them and you'd be out for the final. All I'll say is this: you just by accident had like 3 or 4. You had the whole like Freiburg one, you had the fucking one about inhuman reactions for Get Right, obviously. You had the fucking a whole bunch of them. You had the one of like dupreeh or whatever it would be. Hiko, you had a whole bunch, and it seemed like every other event you'd have one where it'd become. Here's the funny thing: the player would be iconic, but then the cast is almost remembered sometimes more than the details of the play. Is this something you were cognizant of? Because to me, that in itself suggests, listen, I can blow smoke up anyone's ass. That suggests you had something, you had an it factor.
Yeah, so I think this comes back around to the thing that I mentioned earlier about having a certain sort of confidence in myself. And there are probably there are a whole bunch of different ways to do casting and to structure it and to prep and to do all these different things. But for me, something that I've noticed, and I knew this intuitively back then, and then I forgot about it at some point later in my career, and then I've had to relearn it basically almost this year, I would say. And the thing that which is a weird thing to have to go through, I think, but one thing that I knew back then, or I felt in my bones back then, is that no matter how I start a sentence or how I get into like a big, moment, like a big 1 versus 4 or 3 or whatever, it's like, it doesn't really matter how I've, thought about it, or if I have no time to think. Sometimes like a big moment will just happen in front of you, and there's no build up, or you couldn't anticipate it, so you couldn't really build it up or anything. And for some reason, I just I had this feeling inside that like, it doesn't really matter. Like, I will find a way out of this sentence in a cool way, or I will do something to like to get out of it. But it wasn't like because I had prepared like specific things. It was more of a feeling of like, that's just who I am, basically. I had no reason to question that. So I think that gave rise to like a lot of things like that, where it's like, it just kind of happened based off of like that confidence in like, that's it, like nothing is going to shake me from this. So, even if I've been talking for like 2 minutes straight or whatever, like there will be an end to this where it's going to be fireworks, and I'm just going to be ready somehow. Like, even if I couldn't see what that, and I wonder if I actually wonder if there are other areas of like microphone or like live music or any kind of work like that where people can recognize this feeling, but it's hard to explain. It's like, there is a certain rush involved in kind of like going down a road where it's like, I really can't see the path ahead of me. I really have no idea what's happening. And somehow like, I just landed anyway. It's like, right at the end, I do like the, the double, like whatever, like flip, and I land on my feet, and it's all good, But right up until that point, you had no idea that it was going to work. Like, you could have just, fallen and cracked your skull instead, or like metaphorically on the stage. But it's like, somehow like, that's a crazy rush. And like, I think I just enjoyed that feeling so much in the beginning, with no worry about anything, basically.
One of your most iconic calls, I didn't even mention it, was obviously the "Are you kidding me?" That was actually, it's even on your Wikipedia page as his catchphrase. Which, if you don't know, we'll get to that in a second, right? What I want to say is this as a setup. Anyone who gets a catchphrase in sports, Anders, literally brands it. Like, I don't know if you follow the NBA, but there's a caster called Mike Breen, and what he does is if someone hits the last second shot, he goes bang, and it's like a famous thing. And you can look up on like Mike Breen bang compilation, it's all like the best fucking clips he ever did in his career. What people might not know is, even though, look, that is accurate, you did say, "Are you kidding me?" a lot, and it was a classic call. Sure. This is another area from knowing you, I know that actually that got in your fucking head, because the problem you had is this: you did the mistake, Anders, you fired up r/global offensive, and cause they would always go, "He's saying it every fucking round," because that's how they are. You know what these people are like. I know that actually, this is mad, you started trying to like psyop yourself not to say it and to say all this shit. Why not just lean into it and make that like the most iconic catchphrase ever?
Yes, I mean, I think in retrospect that would have been the way to go, right? But you're right. Like, I definitely ended up reading a bunch of comments, and people are like, "He's saying it like every game," and I'm like, that's not true, right? But then arguing with people over that is also just an obvious waste of time, right? So you just don't do it. But I definitely had that feeling of that now it's actually haunting me instead. That it's like it's becoming the main point of criticism for my career at this point in time. People are saying like, all he does is just shout, "Are you kidding me?" and that's it. I'm like, I haven't said it for like 3 tournaments, guys. Like, what the fuck do you want, basically? But yes, I agree. In retrospect, the thing to have done would have just been to own it publicly and say, "Yeah, that's my phrase, and I fucking love it," and I'm gonna, And then also, I think the worst thing is probably there really were a bunch of times afterwards where, whenever I did try to say it, it became more of like a forced sort of thing. Like, it became like basically not good acting, and that also makes people sort of feel like, oh, it's a bit weird, It's like, what's happening here, right? So yeah, like funny now to think about, but that actually did stress me out for a bit. It did.
Do you ever pull it out now?
Yeah, because especially like in the last, whatever, like 6 months or more, like I feel like I've changed my opinion about a bunch of things when it comes to casting. So now I don't think I would be so worried about it, but I would want to do it in like in a much more like, so the right way to, in a much more sort of loving or passionate way, than just not as like here's the highlight moment, I must remember to say the phrase, but like, I'll know it when I feel it, basically. Like, so now I wouldn't shy away from that. I don't care about that. I think it'll be fine. So yeah.
Because along those lines, I actually do have similarly a technical question, which goes, if people don't know, as you say, these are just things you said in the moment, and they were banger lines and they caught fire. But I actually always give credit. If Sadikist is the person that, as far as I know, did invent essentially the crowbar. He invented, like, you come up with the line or half the line before, and then you look for the moment. And I've always said this, what people will never realise is he was really fucking good at it. Because two things. One, if you ever start that line and you use it, you can't just recycle it if the fucking round shit. Like, you sort of have blown it. And he just got, man, look, there's a bit of luck involved. He landed some, obviously, the Big Apple snacks. He had landed a few that were like fucking bangers. But I also think, because a lot of other people who are casters saw him, and maybe they even came up on him, I won't name names. You're all watching and you all know who you are. A lot of the modern casters, Anders, try that approach. And what they don't know is, the thing that was amazing about Sadikist is, I would know from talking to him, was that the prepared line. But it was really hard to tell on the broadcast. It would almost just seem like this guy just said the most perfect shit ever. Like, what the fuck? Or he'd even say like a song lyric and you'd be like, what? How? And he would make it sound, because this was his talent, like it just was some shit off the cuff, which it wasn't. He had a little, he either written it down or he'd thought about it the day before what he might say. Yeah. The problem I have is this. When some of them do the lines now, well, it's a bit like what you're saying about it sounds like acting. Their line is too perfect, but in a way where it sounds almost like you're reading it. You know what I mean? It's like you can tell they're like, oh shit, wait. Oh, and then they link, some imagery, some feet. What do you think about this aspect? Because on the one hand, look, if you can make it work, it will make a fucking epic moment. It could be like the best moment of the tournament. But I know what you mean. If it sounds a bit forced, there's something about it. I don't know how to explain it. It does feel off.
Yeah, I mean, and it's probably... There's probably an area where there's no really right answer. It's just like down to what people enjoy personally. Like the way that I think about it is something like this. Like, if you listen to like a really great like rap, song on the radio, but it's like, it's from the latest album or whatever, it's like you can sit down and really appreciate, like, man, like this is kind of sick. But you also know that it took 100 hours in the studio, and they wrote all the lyrics down, and like they really spent time crafting this, which is really cool. But obviously, if you watch someone who's doing like a freestyle kind of rap, there is a sense sometimes that, as someone's going through, like, you can hear that they're building like this particular, like, metaphor in their rap, and then suddenly you realize, like, oh fuck, like, how is he getting out of this? So it's like, it is like watching someone who's about to fall, and you're like, I don't think he's gonna make it. Like, he's gonna crash out on them. And then when they don't do it and they find a way out and it's sick, you're like, that is somehow just way more exciting. Like that, the sort of the idea that this actually could have gone wrong. I feel like it's a bit of a similar thing with casting sometimes. It's like it being slightly out of control in a moment, I just think can kind of lead to this insane moment where it's like, oh my god, he actually found a way back. Whereas if you are really in control, because you basically structured the narrative of the thing that you're about to say already, you have the really good idea of it. I think that can definitely give a different kind of an effect. I would say now, just to add my own context, like, I will definitely sometimes sit down at like an evening before a game, or sometimes it just happens when I'm on a bus somewhere or whatever. Like, I'll think about a certain thing that just makes sense for me with a player, and that kind of stuff sometimes comes up in your head later when you're doing the casting. You're like, didn't I once think about this? And then it's sort of back there. So you sort of prep, like, I don't know, like half of the thing or like 75% of it, but you don't know exactly how it's going to be used. And I think that's really nice. And I don't think there's anything really wrong with that. So it's kind of hard to, I find it hard to criticize, because I don't know where to draw the line between, like, when is it too much and when is it, basically not enough, and you just end up like, because the downside of not repairing anything is also, it sucks if you have an insane moment and then all you're doing is saying, oh my god, it's like, yeah, like that, I wish I had more to give, And every once in a while that happens to me too, right? Like, sometimes that you're just so caught off guard that that's just what you say, and then that's it, But it's nice to have something more.
One thing I want to ask you about goes like this. If I tell people once upon a time, I mean, the joke is they'd now believe it, but if they've watched CSGO and CS2, it would seem weird now. If I told them there was a time period where Denmark never used to win tournaments, they would always be in the semis, maybe they make a final and blow it. And if I name these three players, spoiler, you've probably seen this all on Reddit now, these three players, mate, are all at the top of those prize money winning lists, and most of them were relevant until very recently, or were still active, and they're all the legends. Carrigan, Device, dupreeh. If I go now, it's like Sesame Street. They're the most known player. These guys were losers. They were chokers. And then in the big game, the joke was, you bet your house on the other team. Doesn't matter fucking who it is. It could be an underdog, could be a bread team.
Yeah.
Tell people, what was the era like when these guys were considered all those labels?
I mean, the funniest thing about Kerrigan, right, was that for a while he wasn't even playing in Danish Counter-Strike. Like, I mean, now he's on FaZe and everything, but like he's just always been like the guy who's sort of been dodging most of those teams, and ended up playing in Germany for a while and everything else. So he's just always been kind of like the Lone Ranger I always respected, I feel like, but has just had like his own view and his own thing that he wanted to do. And for Device and dupreeh, right, like that. Like up until at some point during like the TSM, like end of the TSM into creating Astralis kind of era, you're right. They were the original chokers. It was so, you could be so sure. Like it was, the community meme really was like, okay, yeah, we're gonna get into like deep into the tournament, but we all know what's happening at some. We just know at some point they're gonna crash out and Device will feel nervous and everything will fall apart, and then that's the end of it. And they knew, and I think even at this point, there was a lot of conversation in the. I certainly had this conversation a lot where I would try and tell people like the problem is now they've choked so many times that they recognize all the symptoms like way before we do. Like they can feel it when the game is kind of going off the rails a little bit, and then it's almost more likely that it will happen as a result of that, which I think is like a real thing that can happen to like a team. So the fact that they turned it around and found a way out of that is definitely one of the craziest things to have happened, because. Think about like the attention span for most teams now. Like if things go wrong, you just change a player, just move on. We don't care anymore. Like find somebody new. I felt like they did so much work to fight their way through that mental block, because it was really, really frustrating. Like it was, and obviously more so to them than anybody else. But yeah, they were behind like VeryGames, behind NIP, with some of those early lineups. And yeah, I think that's probably a story that. Like there's so much Counter-Strike stories to tell, like so many to tell, but in a way that is like that's like a really sick achievement that they fought their way through that and just grinded it out, basically.
Have you ever heard the story that we told on By the Numbers of my funny thing I said when Na'Vi won that 2021 Stockholm Major when Blume like proposed on it? Have you ever heard this story?
No.
Like, you might have been casting it for all I know. Basically, when the final ended, and Na'Vi's just won their first major, Simple's getting crowned, it's the big moment, all the fireworks. James Banks runs up there, he's interviewing people, and when he gets to Blume then proposes on camera to his then girlfriend to make it. And famously, because I'm Thorin, behind the scenes, as I'm in the green room, I just turn to Richard and go, he's just ruined his own life, hasn't he? And then. Because
I was there when you said that.
All right, fair enough then. Because my joke essentially, now. A two-parter was, one, look, I wasn't really meaning he's ruined his life getting married. What I meant was, if in any way that marriage doesn't work out, listen, I'm not saying I'm psychic Blume, I'm just saying, I've seen a few rodeos. So if it doesn't work out, the problem is you are always going to look back at that moment when you rewatch it and go, that was the best moment ever, and they've sort of ruined it a bit. So to be rude,
sure.
Back then when I was just a fucking bachelor at large, when you got to the top, Anders, almost immediately it was like, right, I've got a wife now, and actually, I need to get back home. And it's like, Anders, we live on the road, bro. We're like every event.
Sure.
I want to ask you a question. It's a deep one. So it goes like this. You might see at the moment a lot of pros either retire, get worse at the game, or they do struggle with the fact that if you have to have time off and there's some shit hot 19-year-old, they're going to take the 19-year-old. Is there any advice or things you've learned of how to deal with having a family, but at the same time being part of this esports world where you might have to travel 200 days, you might have to go to China and then go to fucking South America, and you can't, listen, we're not all Roger Federer, we can't just bring our families with us where we go. So do you have any thoughts about this?
Yes, I mean, I think there's so many different ways to explain like this whole story, but I think we probably work our way like back. But there was like I had a real moment in time where like I just like had as close as you could possibly have, I think, to having like a mega sort of burnout without actually getting like put in the hospital, but like probably close to that, I would say. And that was built by myself, basically just like going through like stacking a million things on top of each other. So like as you basically pointed out, like doing the Counter-Strike thing alone, like just traveling around the world and like at certain points, I think I did the math at one point. There's 1 year where I had like 200 travel days in a year. So that doesn't leave, like when you're home, it means you're home for like 3 or 4 days, and then you're like, hey, it's good to see you. Oh yeah, we've got nothing to talk about because we don't really even see each other, but it's good to see you. I'm off again, basically. Like it's super weird. And that sort of stuff keeps happening. And then obviously in 15, my son Walter was born. So he's 10 now, which is crazy. But just as an indication of like how insanely wrapped up in Counter-Strike I was, I left the hospital one day after he was born. Like my wife was still in the hospital with him, and I was like, I've got to go to Katowice to cast Counter-Strike, which is such a moronic thing to do. Like when I look back, it's like that's so bad. But in my mind back then, I thought like I have to keep like the momentum of this going. Like I just have to. So I did that, and then. Nana was born in 2018, and this time I didn't leave right away, which obviously I'd learned a tiny bit. I do get a little bit smarter over the years. But so she ends up being born, but like really soon after she's born, my dad is diagnosed with, he'd had cancer for a long time, but basically they say now it's like super ultra cancer. Like this is not going to, you're not going to live much longer, basically. Which we knew was coming at some point, but he was like, hey, listen, this is happening. And at this point I'd taken, I can't remember how much, like a couple of months off basically trying to be home with the newborn, and everything else. So I was really stressed out to get back to work because otherwise we're going to essentially run out of money. So I just worked like that whole year when he was like, I got to see him like, close to when he died, but not as much as I would have wanted properly. And then, just things were just speeding, away at like 1,000,000 miles. I think at this point in time, I had also started Skybox as a company. So we've got like, 2 kids, all the travel, my dad died. It was like just 1,000,000 things stacked on top of each other. And like that all just hit me like a ton of bricks, which obviously when you look back now, it's super obvious, but it was not obvious to me at the time. I had no idea what was happening. Like I really had no idea what was going on. So I would say that in terms of advice to people, the issue is that like you know this as well, Duncan, I'm sure, like there's some advice that you can give people, but unless they've been through the experience, it just doesn't mean anything to them. Like it can be the most true thing in the world, but the advice in itself is kind of like, I don't know, like a vehicle without any gas in it or something. It's like, it just didn't, like, who cares? Like, yeah, it's great, you can drive it if you press the pedal, but like nothing happens. It's like that's sort of how I feel. So I would say, sure, yes, like there are important things to think about and look for and all the rest of it, but if somebody had told me what to avoid before this happened to me, I wouldn't have been able to. I would have just said like, that's it. But I do have one thing, there's one thing that I realized at some point through, like, again, a lot of stupid arguments between me and my wife that were unnecessary. I would do this thing. It's also, again, it's probably my personality thing for me. I would travel to an event, and then I would call her if like some really crazy shit happened. If like somebody was throwing like a bottle in a bar or something, I'd call her and say like, holy shit, like this just happened. But then we would never just talk about like normal day-to-day things. It's like, what's the neighbors doing back home? Like, oh, did they have a new dog? Like small talk, basically. Because I just don't care about small talk. That's just the kind of person that I am, for better or worse. But I realized that the issue is that when I come back home, if we've never even talked while I'm gone, and we don't have like any kind of like framework for our life, we are strangers when I come back home, like essentially. And I realized at that point and made sort of a real commitment to say, we're gonna have to call and talk and just have normal conversations, so that when I get back home, we can continue to have normal conversations and we're not just kind of strangers. I would say for me, that turned out, maybe it's super obvious to everyone else, but it wasn't to me. And that I learned that through, just trial and error, I think.
By the way, without prying too much, obviously you can say whatever you like in response, or not answer or no comment. You know how it goes. So skip forward to keep all the topics together. One of the really, really tough moments I know like that was when we did the second season of Flashpoint. It was smack bang in the middle of COVID, to the extent that the UK was in lockdown. We all flew there. By the way, this even seems itself again like a dream. Like, whose fucking idea was it? It wasn't my idea, don't worry, mate. But whatever, we all did it. We all flew there, even included Americans. We went to Twickenham Stadium, where they play like rugby for England, by the way, but they literally locked us inside the building, and if you left, you had to come back in 5 minutes. Or it was like being sort of in prison. Now again, a bit like when players go, I'm in contract jail, and I go, motherfucker, you make $30,000 a month, right? I'm not complaining totally, guys. I get that during COVID we were doing a live event thing on camera with the studio. Yeah, that's all sick. And compared to lockdown, we were actually allowed somewhat, we were around other people, all the rest of it. But we were just stay there for a whole almost a month. We were just locked in this spill. It felt like like fucking Big Brother or something, mate. You're just around the same people every day until you go to your room. And then at the end, we've never actually told this story publicly. I actually have in a video, but I don't know that you ever have. Basically, what happened was there was a really bizarre thing back then. Everyone remembers how out there it got with all the rules. And it wasn't even just that, like, you know, the people running the event had to police us. We actually had someone from the UK government who was there to, like, oversee that we followed all the protocols or whatever. And one of them was absolute madness. Basically, what it was if one person pops on those tests, which, remember, do technically have false positives, if one person pops, everyone was going to have to stay, they said at the time, for 2 weeks. And by the way, when I say one person, I don't mean me or so. If just some random person in the crew pops, who, by the way, some of them are going home and coming back, you know, if one person pops, and basically like an actual nightmare on something like the last day or the second to last day of the event, they go, bad news, guys. Someone's popped, and it means that you're going to be here 2 weeks. And we've already been there, not only 4 weeks, but you can see why I'm tying it in now. But Anders, it was coming to, like, I think, like, I'm going to say off the top of my head, like the 12th of December or something. And as far as I know, you had your whole Christmas planned with your kids. And your kids are pretty young still. At the time, it's 2020. There must have only been, like, I think 5 for Walter and maybe 3 or something for the other.
2 or 3,
Like, this is not where you can just go, sorry, kids, see you after, because, like, that was fucking a big deal, right?
So, just to add one more bit of context to all of that, right? The first Flashpoint that we had in LA, which actually, in spite of the fact that it happened again, like right on top of COVID, the timing couldn't really have been any better, was actually kind of sick. Like, I really remember that event as, like, being super fun and cool. And, like, it sucks that we never got a chance to kind of, like, do more because the whole country was in crazy mode. But it is what it is. But the plan that I had for that event, because again, it was 6 weeks in LA, I was gonna bring my family over for like 2 of those weeks. That was like the biggest. I was like, that was how we basically rationalized doing it at all, because otherwise I'm just away for 6 weeks, which is a really long time to not see your kids, you know. So I said, like, listen, I'm gonna go there. And then 2 weeks in, you guys fly over, and it's going to be sick. We'll go to Disney World. That was like one of the big things. We go to like the LA Zoo, and Walter was like he was so looking forward to it, you know. And he was like counting the days to, like, he was going to come, and we are going to go to Disney World and all the rest of it. And then obviously COVID completely wrecked that whole thing. They couldn't have traveled there. Like, it just wouldn't have been possible. So I remember we had a call. Like, I remember the call home. Like, what I had to say, basically, you know, we can't make this happen. Like, obviously, we're super sorry. It's out of our control, but it's hard to explain to a kid. Like, they don't understand that. All they hear is like the thing that we've planned for weeks. Like, he's been counting the days, you know.
Yes.
That's not happening anymore. So that was heartbreaking. And then at the end of the next season of Flashpoint, like you said, when we were sort of at the hotel room, I was gonna go home, and it was gonna. I think I was gonna travel home, so I would have been home on the 7th, which is my birthday in December. I think that was it. And that was like the sick timing for us. It's like, okay, listen, I'll basically land, and then it's like, it's Daddy's birthday, all the rest of it. And we had it's no joke, we had a calendar in the hallway that every day Walter would like get up, and he would, like, you know, cross off like a day for when I would come home, you know, and they'd go pick me up at the airport and all the rest of it. So we'd really been, like, the anticipation for this happening was huge. And again, they're also, remember, in lockdown at home in Denmark, right? Like, they're basically just in the house most of the time. Like, my wife is just, like, literally in prison with these 2 kids, which in itself is, like, unbelievably hard and difficult to do. Like, it's not you're not having fun there. You're just, you know, you're full-time parenting. You're like the prison warden, kind of, in that sense. So yeah, and then, yeah, basically the day, or it was like 1 day or 2 before the finals. Like you said, one of the people who had left in the downtime had got COVID and came back to the stadium, obviously not knowing, and then everything got locked down. And I've never been so angry, I think, ever, like, in any esports context. Like, it's tricky because, like, who do you actually become angry at? But I had plans in my head. I thought about this. I thought, I'm gonna find like a car or something. I'll rent a car. And just leave the hotel without telling anyone and just drive to France. And, like, I had all these ideas in my head.
That's such a bad idea.
I just had, like, all these ideas. I was like, I don't care anymore. Like, I'm just going to leave in the middle of the night. Like, what are they going to do? Try and stop me, you know? I was absolutely furious without really knowing, like, who to be angry at, basically. But I just was, like, so mad. And it was super heartbreaking. Like, this idea of, like, having to call home and say, sorry, like, the plan just isn't worth, nothing we do about it. And you're right, like, it was going to be like 2 or 3 weeks. I remember thinking, like, if even one more person like if somebody else is positive at the end of like this week's, it like I can't even get home for Christmas. Like I'm gonna have to spend Christmas in a hotel in London, you know.
Yeah, but as you said, luckily they actually bizarrely, I think they probably complimented the government. We only had to be a week. We had a week and then we got scored. By the way, along these lines, rewind back to when Walter was born, etc. Right? If he is 10 now, Anders, then logically, if for some reason his way of rebelling was to battle you in casting, you know, maybe in 2023, Anders Blume Jr., aka Walter, could actually be a caster. Here's my question: it's the obvious one you ask every sportsman, MMA fighter. Would you let your kid? Would you tell him don't do it? Would you tell him don't be a caster? What would you say?
No, I definitely wouldn't tell him not to do it. Like, he's already been through, like, the phase where he says, this is, like, a new generation thing where, like, everybody wants to be a YouTuber.
Right.
It's like, obviously, when you hear that...
Oh, it's coming from our shit, right? Okay, well, I'll crush you, Walter, if you fuck with me, you know.
Yeah, it's just like, it's the worst thing you can hear. Right?
I know,
it's like, oh, I'm going to be a YouTuber, like, why? But the way that I think about it is, like, for me, it wouldn't be the important thing. Wouldn't really be about whether or not he was casting or YouTubing or anything else like that. Like, it would more be about like what kind of a person is he like at that point in time, right? Because if he tells me he wants to be a YouTuber for like, you know, the fame and money and the joy of just like, you know, like just it's like I just record some videos and upload them and then you know I just get 10 million views. Like if that was his attitude, I'd be like, this is so disappointing, you know. But if he was invested into the craft of it, if he knew how to like edit the videos and had like a real vision for whatever channel he wanted to create, like I would say great, like that sounds awesome, you know. But then that's how I would think about it, and the same for casting, right? Like if it was about casting because it's just like a, you know, oh, it's like you get to talk about video games, that's easy and awesome, that would be disappointing. But if it was like about sort of a love for the thing, then I would say go for it. So it's super boring in a way, but that's my answer to almost everything that he could come up with. I would say, like, it depends on like your own vision and mentality for whatever this thing is. But yeah, his whole generation wants to be YouTubers, so we're probably doomed, you know.
Two things. One, I'm going to ask a question that's going to sound like a fucking normie, like a BBC interview question. But two, when I actually Googled this to see, does Google know? You know, now they've built that stupid AI into Google that tells you some shit. Right? The joke is, Anders, if you actually type in Anders Blume daughter, AI goes, Anders Blume does not have a daughter. I can tell you, Anders definitely does have a daughter, AI. I don't know what fucking LLM you're working on. So anyway, similar answer, question, but it goes like this. Has having a daughter changed your perspective on, for example, female CS, Imperial Valkyrie, things like that? Has it aroused an interest or a curiosity that maybe wouldn't have been there before?
I actually don't. Weirdly, I don't think it's changed my perspective, but that's because I think my appreciation for that part of Counter-Strike goes all the way back to Copenhagen Games, when they would always have a female tournament. Like, so some of the early LAN events that I attended in Copenhagen, it was not like a highlight-worthy thing. It wasn't community news that like, oh, there's a female LAN at the Copenhagen Games. It was just like, yeah, we just all know that there are 2 tournaments basically, and that's, you know, that's just how it is. And I remember standing behind, you know, players like Giuliano and like Saz, who were playing already back then, and I remember thinking, this is like these people want to beat each other so badly. Like it was the level of sort of intense comedy was so fierce. In a way that was like even more, I would say it was like a more intense kind of passion to beat each other than it was over in the male part of the tournament. Because like for a lot of that, it was like, oh, you win some, you lose some, let's go get a drink at the bar or whatever. Like between some of the female teams, it was like, it was really, you know, a sort of a personal passion to say, we're going to bring you down and you're going to feel bad about it, which I know that sounds a bit gruesome, but it actually made watching it just from the sideline like so interesting. You're like, damn, like this is really intense, and I really enjoyed that. Again, like it was easily to recognize that, yeah, sure, like if you know you're trying to match the teams 1-to-1 in the male tournament, then it's going to be different. But I just don't really care about that. Like for me, it was about like how enjoyable is this for me to as a spectator, and I thought it was really sick. So I already had this feeling. I think that, you know, we should find a way to make this like more broadcastable. In my opinion, one of the issues though is that that part of like the female competition side of it is kind of, I don't want to say that it's been like washed away or anything. It's just like I feel like it's not sold in an interesting way. Like I feel like there's a lot of the personality stories there that are I think would captivate people if they knew them more. But for whatever reason, that's not happening at least not to the extent that I wish it would. But it's probably hard to do. I don't know. But I would say obviously you do end up seeing the world differently when you have a daughter. There's no question about it, right? And I think that is something to, you know, it's hard to explain like how that travels across like all the different things you do. But like obviously whenever, you know, some crazy shit's going on in the world, or, you know, like you sort of look at other parts of the world where, again, like maybe the sort of the advancement of female rights has kind of come to a grinding halt or whatever. You do kind of think about it and you think like, damn, like this is, you know, what a crazy situation. So I think specifically in Counter-Strike, I already had a feeling that this is just like, it was worth it for us to invest time and energy into trying to move that space forward. But for sure, in general, like it's it's hard not to kind of, you end up watching the world kind of through her eyes as much as you can, and it's hard to know what to do with as well, because you know, like some of those problems are bigger than you can solve as a single person, right? So definitely tricky.
You know, I'm always rep my set, and the people who've got my back are the following people who support my videos: Matt Pugnaccio Racula, Jason, Jensen Gore, Tosh, Toucan, and you know, the all-time ride or die, Jerky's Minion, isn't it? Special thanks to him. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Want to find out who the upcoming interview subjects are? Do you want to take part in one of those long discussions with me where you set the topics? Maybe you want to ask me a question for my video AMA? Well, all of those perks and more are available where? At the Patreon link in the description box below. So put your money where your mouth is and join the Scroominati today. You dig?